Hey everyone, thanks for joining us and tuning into our podcast. Today's podcast is quite interesting to its nature. Is Elon Musks Groke AI secretly Muslim? What do you think? Please write in comment section. Now let's see what Jack and Wilson have to say.
Okay, so have you heard about this this new AI chatbot, Grok?
Mm-hmm.
It's been causing like a real stir.
Yeah, I've seen it popping up all over.
Yeah, it's like it's just not holding back on giving these really straight answers,
Right.
And people are like really into it, especially when it comes to those kind of sensitive topics that, people usually tiptoe around.
It's definitely a different kind of perspective, right?
Totally.
It's almost like because it's processing so much data
Right.
that it's able to look at things in a different light.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're going to dig into today.
Okay.
Specifically, what Grok had to say when it was asked about Islam and Muslims.
Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and we've actually got this YouTube transcript here
Oh, perfect.
that like lays out a bunch of these exchanges, and I think there's a lot to unpack here.
Definitely. Let's dive in.
So our mission for this deep dive is to really understand like what can we learn when an AI is examining Islam through this data lens.
Okay, I like it.
All right, so one of the first things they asked Grok was actually pretty straightforward.
Okay.
Like if you had to pick between Hinduism and Islam, which would you choose and why?
Yeah. What was Grok's response to that?
Grok said Islam. And the reason it gave was really interesting. It highlighted the emphasis on the 5 pillars of faith.
Oh, wow. Okay, so like the daily prayers, the salat, the fasting during Ramadan.
Yeah, exactly. So the salat, the roza, the giving of zak, the Hajj pilgrimage.
Yeah.
It's like it zeroed in on these really practical, foundational parts of the faith as like the key difference.
I mean, that's so interesting because it suggests that maybe when an AI is analyzing a religion, it's drawn to those observable things, you know?
Right.
Like the structured practices, the things you can actually see happening.
Yes, looking at the framework,
Yeah,
a concrete element.
See actions.
Yeah.
I wonder why those pillars in particular would stand out to an AI.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, maybe it's because those pillars are so clearly defined and consistently practiced by so many people. Like the data on those rituals must be just way more accessible and quantifiable.
Yeah, it's like a really clear signal in the data.
Exactly. So then they went on to ask Grok to pinpoint 10 world-changing aspects of Islam.
Okay, wow, so even more specific.
Yeah, and this is where it got really fascinating.
Okay, so what did Grok come up with?
It listed out 10 points.
10.
Yeah, so first it mentioned the concept of tawhid, the oneness of God.
Okay.
And then zakat came up again, which is interesting, that system of charitable giving.
Right.
It also emphasized like the whole helping the poor being like a core principle in Islam.
It is a big part of it, yeah.
And then it talked about the guidelines of halal and haram.
Right. What's permissible versus forbidden.
Exactly. And then it mentioned surah, which refers to the chapters in the Quran.
Okay.
Then it brought up the practice of shura.
Oh, interesting. So the consultation in committees before taking action?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which, really points to a specific model for decision-making.
Very interesting.
And then it listed waqf, which are religious endowments.
Which I guess you could say those have been a bit controversial sometimes.
Yeah. The YouTuber we're watching actually pointed that out.
Interesting.
But it's still really significant historically in shaping societies.
Yeah, sure.
And lastly, it mentioned akhlaq, the concept of ethics and overall behavior.
Wow, that's a really broad range of things.
It is.
From like theological ideas to very practical social ethical guidelines.
Right. And I think the inclusion of shura is really insightful. It shows that there's like a built-in mechanism for community input.
Right.
And even mentioning waqf, despite the controversies, it highlights how important it's been historically.
Yeah. What do you think really jumps out to you when you look at this list from an AI's point of view?
You know what I think is really fascinating is how Grok blends the spiritual and the societal aspects.
I see what you mean.
It's not just about beliefs. It's identifying those principles that have a real impact on how people live and interact.
That's a great point.
Like from economic structures with zakat and waqf, to ethical frameworks with akhlaq, to even governance with shura.
It's like it's looking at Islam as this whole system.
Totally.
So with those kind of more straightforward questions out of the way, it was almost bound to happen.
Oh, yeah.
Someone asked Grok about a more sensitive topic.
Jihad.
Exactly.
So the question was really simple. It was just, what is jihad in Islam?
Right. And how did Grok respond to something that loaded?
So it was really direct in like trying to separate the true meaning from all the acts of terror that we hear about.
Yeah.
So it defined jihad as striving or struggling for a noble cause.
Okay.
And then it broke it down into two main categories to help clarify.
Oh, that's helpful.
Yeah. So the first category was jihad akbar, which is like the greater jihad.
Okay.
And it explained that as the internal struggle against your own negative desires,
Right. So it's about self-improvement.
Exactly.
I like that.
And then there's jihad asgar, which is the lesser jihad.
Okay.
And that's the one that can involve physical struggle, but specifically in self-defense.
Right. So not initiating aggression or anything like that.
Exactly. And Grok actually even referenced a specific verse from the Quran here.
Oh, really? Which one?
It was Surah al-Baqarah, verse 190.
Okay.
And it says, fight in the way of Allah those who fight you, but do not transgress. Indeed, Allah does not like transgressors.
What's setting a really clear boundary?
It's emphasizing that it's defensive in nature and that you can't go beyond what's absolutely necessary.
And I thought it was interesting that the YouTuber we're watching actually went a bit deeper than Grok's initial two categories.
Oh, yeah.
And pointed out that there are more dimensions to jihad that are traditionally considered.
Okay, like what?
So there's jihad bin nafs, which is the struggle against your ego and anger.
Okay.
And then there's jihad bil lisan, which is like striving with your words, in pursuit of the truth.
Okay.
And then there's jihad bil mal, which is about using your wealth for good, like charitable giving.
Right.
And lastly, jihad bis saif, which is that physical struggle, the fighting with the sword, but again, always within very strict ethical guidelines and only in self-defense.
Yeah, it's so crucial that the YouTuber reinforced that same point that Grok made initially.
Absolutely.
The terrorism that we see happening that's done in the name of jihad doesn't actually fit into any of these legitimate categories.
Doesn't at all.
Like the killing of innocent people is absolutely not considered jihad.
Nope, not at all.
So for someone who only hears about jihad in this negative light,
Right.
What's the most important thing to remember?
I think the key takeaway here is that there's this huge difference between jihad, which is about striving for good in all these different ways,
Right.
and the violence that we see from those extremist groups.
Exactly. Those are two completely separate things.
Yeah.
And I think Grok highlighting that noble cause aspect.
Right.
And the difference between internal struggle and defensive struggle.
Yeah.
That's a really important place to start to understand it better.
Definitely. So moving on, we get to another area where there are so many misconceptions.
Yeah.
And someone asked Grok about the whole idea of eradicating Islam.
The question was straight up, Islam haters are dreaming of eradicating Islam. What do you have to say about this?
Wow. Okay. Straight to the point.
Yeah. And Grok didn't hold back.
Okay.
It said that kind of hatred is just Islamophobia.
Right.
And then it pointed to the fact that Islam has 19 billion followers.
19 billion?
Yeah, and some sources even say it's over 2 billion now.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, and Grok was basically saying, come on, eradicating a religion with that many people is practically impossible.
Not going to happen.
And not to mention, it would be a huge cultural loss.
For sure.
And the YouTuber also made a good point that those kinds of statements about eradication are more about expressing hostility than an actual plan.
It's more about the sentiment.
Right, but Grok bringing up the sheer number of Muslims and the impact Islam has had culturally,
Right.
it really puts those statements into perspective.
Yeah.
Those numbers are hard to ignore.
Okay, so then what happened?
So then they asked a question that gets to the heart of some really harmful misinformation.
Oh.
They asked if the Quran permits theft, rape, and murder during Ramadan or at any other time.
Oh, wow, that's a tough one.
Yeah, and it's so important to clarify this because those false claims are out there.
They are, yeah, and people believe them.
So Grok's answer was a very clear no.
Good.
It said straight up that the Quran does not allow those things in Ramadan or any other month.
Okay.
And it emphasized that those acts are considered major sins in Islam with very specific punishments.
Right. It doesn't mess around with that stuff.
No. And Grok even gave some examples of the punishments, like the penalty for theft
Okay.
and the very serious consequences for rape and murder, including the idea of qisas, which is just retaliation.
I mean, that's intense.
It is. And the YouTuber was really strong on this point.
Really?
They said that people who are sick with Islamophobia need to understand this basic part of Islam.
They do. It's fundamental.
Yeah. So why do you think it's so important for an AI to be able to say this so clearly?
I think it shows that data can be powerful in fighting misinformation. Like when an AI has processed all this text and information, and it can just shut down these lies so definitively,
right?
It proves how ridiculous those claims are.
Yeah, it cuts through all the noise and gives you a clear, data-driven answer.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, so let's switch gears to something more positive.
Okay, I'm ready.
Someone asked Grok a really open-ended question.
Okay.
They asked, who is the best person in the world who has spoken about global humanity regardless of religion?
Wow, that is open-ended.
It is, and this one isn't specifically about Islam or anything.
Yeah.
But according to the transcript, Grok's likely answer was Prophet Muhammad.
Interesting.
Yeah, it suggests that he's a really strong contender because his teachings emphasize helping everyone no matter their faith.
Right.
And those teachings still have a huge impact through Islam today.
They do.
And Grok even mentioned that some scholars consider him to be like one of the most influential people in history.
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that even when asked about a figure outside of a religious context,
right,
Grok's analysis still led it to this conclusion.
Yeah, that really highlights the huge influence of Prophet Muhammad's teachings on a global level.
Exactly, even from a purely historical and social perspective.
It's a big deal.
So now the big question,
okay,
given all of Grok's answers, does this mean that it's Muslim somehow?
Right.
Or does it just mean that on certain points, what Muslims believe happens to line up with factual, data-driven analysis?
That's the real question, isn't it?
It is, and Grok itself is really clear on this.
Okay.
It says flat out that it's an AI and it doesn't have a religion.
Okay.
Not Muslim, not Hindu, not Christian, not anything.
Interesting.
Its goal is to give impartial, logical answers based on the information it's been trained on.
Right.
So when it talks about Prophet Muhammad's influence or explains Islamic principles,
right,
it's important to understand that it's not expressing personal beliefs or religious leanings.
It's more like a factual acknowledgement.
Exactly.
Which makes sense because there are historical analyses from scholars that support these points.
Right. Yeah, like Michael Hart in his book, The 100.
Right.
He recognized the huge historical impact that Islam has had on millions of people and on the course of civilization.
And Grok is processing all of that information.
Yeah, so it's emphasizing that its statements are grounded in data and logic.
Not faith.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the YouTuber even made this really pointed analogy.
What was that?
They compared people who might reject Grok's data-backed insights to Abu Jahl.
Oh, wow.
Who was a major opponent of early Islam and rejected even clear evidence.
Right.
So to sum it all up,
okay,
our deep dive into Grok's responses about Islam shows that this AI is offering perspectives that align with a lot of the core tenets of the faith.
Right.
And with the recognized historical impact of Islam.
Yeah.
And it's highlighting things like peace, charity, and the rejection of violence committed in the name of religion.
Yeah.
But it's also constantly saying, hey, I'm not religious at all.
Right.
And it's basing his answers on facts and logic.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so interesting.
So we want to leave you with a question to think about.
Okay.
What does it mean when an AI that's processing tons of information in a seemingly objective way comes to similar conclusions about a religion as its followers?
That is a really interesting question.
It is.
And how does that challenge or maybe reinforce your own views about Islam?
Yeah, and any biases you might have.
It definitely makes you think.
We really encourage you to consider what it means to have what could be a data-driven perspective on faith and history.
I know, I will.
It definitely gives you something to ponder.
It does.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
We'll see you next time.
Sounds good.
Thank you for joining us for today's podcast. I hope you've gained some valuable insights. If you're a truth seeker, yearning for divine light and ready to step out of darkness, now is your moment. The truth is that Allah is the one and only creator of the universe. He has sent over 124,000 messengers and prophets to guide humanity, starting with Adam and culminating with the final messenger, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon them all. If you resonate with this message, you might be ready to embrace Islam. Simply recite the Shahada, the Islamic declaration of faith. For further support, feel free to join our WhatsApp group. You can send us a private message there. The link is in the video description. Don't wait until it's too late. We look forward to connecting with you soon.